Welcome in on a Thursday. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Helene barreling through the Gulf of Mexico towards Florida. We are live on the ground tracking the hurricane before it makes landfall. Plus, Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade fire in the Middle East. Is diplomacy any closer to getting a ceasefire? This is CBS News 24/7. Let's go. We will get to hurricane coverage in just a moment, but first, our monitors take us to New York City, where Mayor Eric Adams now facing 5 federal charges of bribery, wire fraud, and soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations. These allegations, they date back nearly a decade when investigators say Adams started accepting bribes and contributions. So here is more on what officials had to say about those charges.
The mayor had a duty to disclose these gifts on his annual public disclosure forms so that the public could see who was giving him what. But as we allege, year after year after year, he kept the public in the dark. He told the public he received no gifts, even though he was secretly being showered with them. We allege that Adams accepted these benefits knowing that they were given to him because of his position.
All right, so Mayor Adams responded to the indictment during a press conference in New York, denying all charges brought against him. He was met by a number of angry protesters claiming the mayor failed the city. Adams said he will not resign from his position and pleaded for New Yorkers to wait to form opinions until the trial begins. Let's take a listen.
We expected this. This is not surprising to us at all. The actions that have unfolded over the last 10 months, the leaks, the commentary, the demonizing, this did not surprise us that we reached this day. And I ask New Yorkers to wait to hear our defense before making any judgments.
All right, New York City Mayor there speaking. CBS News national correspondent Nikki Batiste has been on this story all day. So it was a 57-page indictment. Pretty hearty charges there. What can we glean from all of this, Nikki?
Well, Juliette, to just remind viewers, it's against federal law for foreign money to be accepted to fund a U.S. political campaign. This is what this is all about. Mayor Adams was using straw donors, basically third parties, to sneak in money from officials in Turkey. That's the country this indictment focuses on, a country Adams himself said he has visited 6 times. Here are some of the figures. The indictment says that Adams accepted more than $10 million in matched public funds. It talks about at least $100,000 worth of luxury benefits he accepted, like Turkish airline flights, upgrades, luxury hotels during his stays in Turkey. And one point that really struck out to me, one of the Turkish officials said, "You need to repay me for this favor." And a few days later, Adams pressured the fire department here in New York to certify a Turkish consular skyscraper to be allowed to be built. It was expected to fail inspection. An employee there said Adams actually threatened his job if he didn't pass this inspection. So we're talking about safety here of New Yorkers. And lastly, another point that really struck me is federal prosecutors talked about Adams trying to create a fake paper trail and deleting text messages to cover up these actions. Juliette?
Yeah, Nikki, so the mayor made it clear, we just heard him say he will not resign. So what happens now in these legal proceedings?
So I think everyone's expecting the mayor at some point to turn himself in. Then he has a right to due process. This will go through the legal process. But although the mayor is adamant he will not resign, I still think that's the million-dollar question. Might he? The only person who has the power to remove him from office is New York Governor Kathy Hochul. We reached out to her today, and she said she needs to look at the indictment. And so far, she's given no indication of any intent to remove him. Juliette?
All right, Nikki Batiste, thank you so much for being with us today. Let's go to our video feeds, giving you a view of conditions now on Florida's Gulf Coast. So this is how Treasure Island looks with Hurricane Helene just moving towards the state. So it's expected to make landfall sometime tonight. Evacuation orders, some mandatory, are in effect for several counties. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis spoke earlier this morning with a clear message for the people living in his state.
just listen to your local officials, depending on where you are in the state. And there will become a time in North Florida as the hours pass today where they may tell you stay put. But don't put yourself at risk. We have fatalities on the roadways in hazardous conditions almost every storm, and those can be avoided with proper planning.
Florida's governor, as well as President Biden, have already signed emergency declarations covering dozens of counties, with FEMA teams on the ground and ready to respond. So let's get to meteorologist Zoe Mentz with more on where Helene is heading now. Zoe.
It is pretty crazy the way that the National Weather Service is describing the storm. Unsurvivable storm surge. They do not use those kind of terms lightly, because this is a very impactful, huge storm system that's making its way towards Florida right now. This was our view early this morning. You could see the swirling of that low pressure system. It is huge. You could see it from space, and that low pressure system will continue to make its way towards the Florida coast. It has re-strengthened over just the past couple of hours, and it is currently undergoing what we know as rapid intensification. Where it was a tropical storm yesterday, it could be reaching Florida by the time it makes landfall as a hurricane, or a Category 4 hurricane. That's bringing us wind gust over 125 miles an hour. So that storm is going to continue to make its way across the eastern half of the United States and impacting quite a lot of people even further inland. But let's take a closer look at what you can expect during landfall. Likely going to be making landfall between 7 and 10 p.m. tonight. Along with the landfall is very high storm surge, 20 feet potentially of storm surge down near Florida's Big Bend. And we're going to continue to see a lot of winds along with the storm surge. Look at how strong those wind gusts are as they make landfall. We're expecting wind gusts to be upwards of 110 to potentially up to 130 miles an hour as it makes landfall. Sustained winds. That is extremely high. We are going to be seeing damaged trees, power lines down. A lot of damages are on the way. So we're going to continue to keep our eyes on that storm system as it is going to be making landfall tonight, Juliet.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Zoe. So let's bring in CBS News national correspondent Manny Bajorquez. He is live for us in Tampa ahead of Helene's landfall there. Choppy waters behind you. What can you tell us right now? I see some people on the pier actually walking directly behind you right now.
Yeah, a lot of people have come out to look, get their own video and photos with the water splashing around. You're hoping that pretty soon they will heed the warnings and stay away from these areas, because conditions will only get worse here. Just to give you a sense of the size of this storm, Tampa is about 200 miles or so from where it is expected to make landfall, the eye of the storm at least. But we're already feeling the impacts here. And going into this evening, we could feel tropical storm gusts, and we're expected to get 5 to 8 feet of storm surge. So let that factor in. That is why there have been mandatory evacuations ordered for some coastal low-lying areas here in the Tampa Bay area. So we've seen people prepping. We did hear some concerns that many people were not necessarily getting out of these areas, and the window to do that is starting to close.
Yeah, Manny, I can just see people behind you with their phones kind of taking it all in. Hopefully that's just a last-minute glimpse for them before they clear out as well. Do you get a sense people are going to heed the warnings?
Look, when it starts pouring here, like it did earlier this morning with the outer bands, I'm assuming many of the people here will clear out. We may still have to be here to show you what's going on. But you got to remember that with the water, it's the number one killer of people during these hurricanes. And it's not just what's falling from the sky that could unleash flash flooding, but it's the storm surge. And that's not just the danger of water coming up around you. It's the movement of the water. Cars can be moved, homes can be moved. It's just not something you want to mess with. And this storm is just so large.
Yeah, understandably. All right, Manny Bajorquez, thank you so much for being there for us. Appreciate it. So Hurricane Helene is also causing major problems in the sky. So here is a live look. This is from the website FlightAware. These are the planes in the sky right now. We're talking delays and cancellations being reported from nearly every major airport in Florida. And then check out this video. We just got to our feeds. Boy, this is the International Space Station. It flew over Hurricane Helene just moments ago. So this gives you really an eye-to-eye look at Helene's path and the strength of it. You can possibly hear some of the talk going on right now.
The International Space Station is currently passing just
There you go. You could hear a little bit as we track Hurricane Helene's landfall. CBS News certainly has you covered on air and online. You can head to cbsnews.com/Helene for all of the most up-to-date information. All right, turning overseas to the growing tensions in the Middle East. The Israeli military carrying out new deadly strikes today in Lebanon. The latest wave of attacks showing signs Israel is not backing down, rejecting international calls for a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. CBS News correspondent Imtiaz Tayyab is live in Lebanon. Thank you so much for joining us. So there's certainly a lot to unpack here. What is the latest?
Julia, good to be with you. Well, as you can imagine, the situation here in Lebanon is extremely volatile after yet another day of Israeli strikes across the south and the east of the country. Over the past 6 days or so, over 600 people have been killed in those strikes, including a number of civilians. And here in Beirut, where I am, in the southern suburb of Dahia, there's been a strike in a residential neighborhood. Now, we understand that it was an Israeli strike targeting what's been described as a Hezbollah commander. We're still waiting for confirmation of that. But if it is the case, it does appear to be yet another assassination by Israel as they try to effectively decapitate Hezbollah, one of its most bitter rivals. But it really just underscores how the situation here in Lebanon is extremely tense. Not only have we seen the death toll rise, there are so many people who have been displaced in the fighting, many people sheltering in schools and really anywhere they can. Julia.
Yeah, Imtiaz, if you can hear me, the head of the Palestinian Authority addressed the UN General Assembly just this morning in New York, demanding that Israel stop the fighting in Gaza. So here's what he had to say, and then I'll check right back with you.
Stop this crime. Stop it now. Stop killing children and women. Stop the genocide. Stop sending weapons to Israel. This madness cannot continue. The entire world is responsible for what is happening to our people in Gaza and the West Bank. The West Bank that is under a daily and continuous Israeli aggression. It is under a vicious settlement activity. They're building everywhere in Palestine, as if all of Palestine is theirs.
All right, so Imtiaz, where do ceasefire negotiations stand right now between Israel and Hezbollah and between Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, that's right. It's a really complicated picture because we have now 2 ceasefire proposals in front of us. We'll start with what the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas was referencing, of course, the terrible war in Gaza, which is now nearly a full year of fighting, which has just utterly devastated Gaza, over 40,000 people killed. He saying very clearly that, in his words, the madness must stop. But frankly, those ceasefire talks are stalled and have been for quite some time, and it's looking quite bleak. Whereas here in Lebanon, early this morning, we all woke up to the news that President Biden, along with his European allies, as well as Arab states, had managed to propose a 21-day pause in the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, which would hopefully lead to some sort of lasting truce between these 2 bitter rivals, and perhaps more importantly for Israel, the return of 60,000 of its displaced residents, which is why Israel says it is carrying out the strikes that it has been inside Lebanon against Hezbollah. But we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has just arrived in New York to address the UN General Assembly, saying that he essentially will not accept a truce and that the fighting will continue. Julia.
CBS News correspondent Imtiaz Tayyab, thank you so much for your report. Appreciate it. All right, also happening today, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy met with Congress today to discuss ongoing support for the war against Russia. We will go to D.C. for the very latest. You're watching CBS News 24/7. And welcome back. We want to take you to the White House press briefing from just moments ago. The FEMA administrator just spoke about Hurricane Helene. Let's listen in.
I just want everybody to know that this is going to be a multi-state event with the potential for significant impacts from Florida all the way to Tennessee. And the president wants to make sure that everyone is paying attention to the potential life-threatening impacts that this storm may bring. And he has directed me to travel there tomorrow to assess the impacts. The entire state of Florida is under some type of warning right now, whether that's a hurricane warning or a tropical storm warning. And we expect life-threatening flash flooding in the state's north as the storm continues to move north. And so I need everybody to pay attention to their local officials. They're going to have the best information on the specific risks where you are at. We're already seeing impacts in Florida, and the forecast indicates that we could see up to 20 feet of storm surge. So just think back 2 years ago to Hurricane Ian. The peak storm surge from that was 14 feet, and we saw the amount of destruction, and 150 people lost their lives, the majority of them from drowning. So please take this threat from storm surge seriously. Residents that are in these areas, they can still take action. They can take action now to move out of harm's way. And remember that you may only need to go 10 or 15 miles inland to get away from the threat of the storm surge itself, because water is the #1 reason that we see people lose their lives in these storms. So please don't underestimate what the impacts could possibly be. So at the president's direction, we have over 1,100 personnel so far across the federal government supporting the preparedness efforts for this storm. We also have an additional 700 personnel from FEMA that are already in these states supporting other disasters that we can quickly pivot to support any of the response needs as needed. Some of the resources that we have already deployed include 8 search and rescue teams across Florida and Georgia, as well as resources from the Coast Guard, the Department of Defense, to immediately support any life-saving operations as needed. The Army Corps of Engineers has power restoration teams and debris specialists who are going to be able to help restore power and support debris removal operations as soon as it is safe to do so. We have health and medical task forces from Health and Human Services to evaluate the impacts to medical facilities. We have food, water, generators, and tarps that are deployed to staging locations across the region, and so they are easily accessible and movable post-storm. And the Red Cross is actively standing up shelters in areas that are expected to see and feel the impacts from Helene. My regional administrator is currently embedded in the Florida Emergency Operations Center, as well as incident management assistance teams in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and we have one currently moving to North Carolina today, so we can ensure seamless communications between the federal government and the needs of the states. I'm very grateful, as you heard, President Biden quickly approved pre-landfall declarations for Florida.
All right, these
Georgia,
comments
and
just
North
moments
Carolina.
ago from the
And
FEMA
this
administrator
allows us to
talking about
immediately
Hurricane
provide any of
Helene
that
before it makes
life-saving
landfall.
support
Very
in the coming
serious
days.
warnings to people
And I'm
in that
grateful for the rest of
area.
the federal
Heed
family
the
that is
warnings,
there on the
evacuate. It
ground
may
working
only
with us
be
side by
10
side.
miles away from where you currently are, but stay away from the water, as that is the biggest concern right now. All right, we're going to move on to Capitol Hill. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy met with Congress today to discuss ongoing support for the war against Russia. He emphasized the need to be more forceful in their efforts before the end of the year, capitalizing on the momentum troops have built in the last few months. Congress also prepped Zelenskyy for his meeting with President Biden happening now. So he had this to say before heading over to the White House. Take a listen.
Mr. President, can you bring an end to this war?
Of course we have to.
So the two are set to discuss what Zelenskyy calls the victory plan to defeat Russia. He's looking to strengthen support for Ukraine before a new president is sworn into the White House in January. Zelenskyy also holding a press conference alongside Vice President Kamala Harris before holding a separate bilateral meeting with her. So CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman joining us now with all of the details and what we expect to come out of these two critical discussions. Thanks for joining us.
Hey there, Juliet. Good to be with you. That's right. It is a pivotal moment for President Zelenskyy of Ukraine as he meets with Washington leaders, including a bipartisan group of lawmakers on Capitol Hill. He'll, of course, head to the White House where he'll meet with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And we do anticipate remarks with President Zelenskyy and Vice President Harris. But in these meetings, I'll note that the president of Ukraine is going to discuss what they've been referring to as their victory plan. And that includes maintaining the battlefield militarily. That means if the United States, or whether or not the United States will continue to provide those arms, as was announced earlier today, billions worth of assistance and military assistance to the Ukrainians. On top of that, the Ukrainians, the populace there, wants to know if they'll be safe politically, if they'll be able to join alliances such as NATO and the European Union to further prosper in the future. And on the last thing I'll mention as well is economic assistance. If there's a pause in fighting, this plan will include an ask to the U.S., not only to the United States, but also to Europeans as well, European nations, whether or not they'll support the economic recovery. Of course, we anticipate lots of rebuilding, lots of funds will be needed to rebuild Ukraine if and once there is a pause in fighting, Juliet.
Yeah, and as we have you there, what else are we expecting to come out of the White House today, specifically with the Harris campaign?
Yeah, so we know that the vice president and the president are set to speak on gun violence. They're going to talk about this new executive order that the president will sign today that essentially creates a task force that's going to be called the Emerging Firearms Threat Task Force, and that'll look at arms that are not serialized, those 3D printed weapons, weapons that are somehow turned into machine guns with an illegal device. The president forming this task force to look at ways to minimize gun violence on those fronts in terms of these emerging firearm threats that we're seeing pop up across the nation. And I'll also note that Vice President Harris, while she is at these White House events today, she was on the campaign trail yesterday talking about her economic plan, drilling down on the details, talking about things that she's mentioned before, but also talking about manufacturing and how she wants to bring the United States to lead in the 21st century in terms of manufacturing and things such as AI and quantum computing. On top of that, we anticipate Harris will visit the U.S. southern Mexico border. She is anticipated to travel to Arizona tomorrow, where she'll lay out her support for the bipartisan immigration law that was really scuttled because former President Trump, called on Republicans to not go through with that legislation. So we'll anticipate a lot of criticism coming from the vice president to the former president there on the campaign trail, as she really drills down on two of the weak spots seen for her campaign: the economy and immigration. Juliet.
Willie James Inman, CBS News White House correspondent. Willie, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. And remember, CBS News will host the only vice presidential debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz on Tuesday in New York. So join us live for coverage of the debate, moderated by Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7 and at 8 p.m. on CBS. Up next, our video feeds take us to New York, where Donald Trump's lawyers are fighting to overturn a civil fraud judgment that could cost him nearly $500 million. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We'll be right back. To New York now, where Donald Trump's lawyers are fighting to overturn a civil fraud judgment that could cost him nearly $500 million. CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman is live outside the New York Appeals Court. So, Katrina, thanks for joining us. Walk us through the case and what happened in court today.
So, this is Trump's New York civil fraud case where he received a judgment of almost $500 million. And Juliet, that judgment is accruing over $100,000 in interest every day. Trump's lawyers are arguing that, for one, the size of this judgment is grossly unjust. They also argued that some of the allegations were brought outside of the statute of limitations and questioned the statute that the New York Attorney General used in this case, whether it was appropriately applied here. I was just in the appellate arguments. There were a panel of 5 judges, and at least 2 of the judges seemed to have skepticism here. One of them called the size of the judgment troubling. They also questioned whether Attorney General Letitia James was overreaching with her application of this statute. In this case, they said you have sophisticated private parties and that there's no apparent harm that was done here. So we don't yet know when they're going to make a decision on this, whether it will be before the election, but at least a couple of them did seem to be questioning aspects of this judgment and decision.
So, Katrina, let's talk about Trump's other legal troubles as well. We're expecting a major filing from special counsel Jack Smith. So what could that entail today?
That's correct, Juliet. We are expecting the opening brief on presidential immunity. This is Special Counsel Jack Smith's explanation of both pled and unpled facts against former President Donald Trump. So new information could come to light in this briefing. We're also expecting new evidence. There's going to be copious exhibits. Smith has asked to make this briefing 180 pages. That is 4 times the normal length of a briefing like this, and Trump tried to push against that, but Judge Chutkan allowed it. Jack Smith is really trying to persuade the judge here that the allegations against Donald Trump in this election interference case can stand under the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling. Now, we don't actually know how much of this will be public. Our understanding is that it may be filed under seal and that Smith will also provide a redacted version of the brief. So it will be very interesting to see what information comes to light here and when it comes out, whether we're able to see any of this new evidence before the election.
All right, good information. Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, thank you. Live from New York. Appreciate it. All right, we're keeping a close eye on what's happening on the ground in Florida. Coming up, CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen is in Tallahassee for us all. You're watching CBS News 24/7. And welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We want to take you back to New York now, the city reacting to the fallout of the new indictments against Mayor Eric Adams. Adams now faces 5 federal counts, including bribery and wire fraud. Federal officials spoke about the 57-page indictment at length during a press conference earlier today. They emphasized the seriousness of the charges.
The indictment of a sitting mayor is not just another headline. It is a stinging reminder that no one is above the law or beyond reproach. And it serves as a sobering moment for all of us who place our trust in elected officials. Today's indictment sends a powerful message to every elected official in this country. Public service is a profound responsibility and should be a noble calling.
Adams is maintaining his innocence, adding that he will not be stepping down in light of the charges. He held a press conference earlier.
We expected this. This is not surprising to us at all. The actions that have unfolded over the last 10 months, the leaks, the commentary, the demonizing, this did not surprise us that we reached this day. And I ask New Yorkers to wait to hear our defense before making any judgments.
Adams faces up to 45 years in prison. He has yet to make a court appearance or turn himself into authorities. We will continue to monitor this case. We'll bring you the latest when it comes into our newsroom. All right, let's take you back down to Florida as we track Hurricane Helene's landfall today in the Sunshine State. Far from it today. This is a look from Fort Myers Beach on Florida's west coast. Let's check in with Zoe Mintz for the very latest on Helene.
Keeping a very close eye on that extremely large storm system that is impacting basically the entirety of Florida and bringing almost the entire state the chance of tornadoes. Yes, hurricane do bring tornadoes as well as storm surge, flooding, and very, very strong winds. So let's take a look at where it was early this morning because that thing was massive. It is barreling towards Florida. You notice the sun is still down though, so it has quickly made progress closer to the coast over the past couple of hours. And if we look at what we can expect over the next 24 hours, that storm system will quickly make landfall, expecting to be making landfall between 7 and 10 o'clock tonight. And that is going to be extremely impactful when it comes to storm surge. Storm surge upwards of 10 to 20 feet. I am about 5.5 feet tall. Double me and a little bit more. That's how high the water is expected to be. That is what the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center have described as unsurvivable. They have used the words deadly storm surge, and they do not use those words lightly. So please, if you have an evacuation order, get out of there. This is going to be a very terrible storm system that is on the way. Not just the storm surge, but also the winds that it's going to bring along with it. Sustained winds as it makes landfall as a Category 3 or 4 hurricane are going to be over 115 to nearly 130 miles an hour. And you notice that storm system, yes, it definitely loses its speed as it makes its way across Georgia, but it's still going to be in places like Georgia and places like South Carolina. Tropical storm force wind gust upwards of 60 to 75 miles an hour. So this storm system is going to be a quick one, but it's going to be extremely impactful. So I hope everybody keeps their eye on this and make sure that you keep your thoughts and call anybody that lives down there. Like I said, Juliet, this is going to be a 24-hour system, and we're going to have to barrel down and hunker down for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I hear the urgency just in your voice and the heeds of warning for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're keeping a close eye on what's happening on the ground in Florida. CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen is in Tallahassee for us. Tom, thanks for joining us. I know the city's not in the direct path of Helene, but still it's preparing. So what can you tell us?
Oh, yeah, Juliet. Well, we're going to definitely see the impacts. The mayor coming out just minutes ago saying that we can expect to see the situation deteriorate within the next half hour to an hour. And the concern here is the flying debris. Debris like this that will be hurling through the air, but it's not these branches. Look what it's attached to, this massive live oak tree. And if there's one thing you know about Tallahassee, Juliet, it is that the city is full of dense trees just like this one. Now imagine 120-mile-per-hour wind speeds hurling giant branches, hundreds of pounds through the air. That is going to cause some serious damage. That's exactly what they saw earlier this summer when a pack of 3 tornadoes hit this city, knocking out power. And just over here, you can see that there are power lines nearby, and that is a major concern. But the tree canopy, no doubt, will be the big story here in Tallahassee, because there is a massive tree canopy that is full of trees, live oaks like that are hard, dense wood, but also gigantic pine trees over here that is softwood. Those are easy to snap. Those are the main concern, and that's what's really causing a threat for the power lines here. And that's what authorities are going to be watching. We know that authorities are already launching teams of utility workers all across Tallahassee to make sure that they can be deployed immediately when it's safe to restore power. But power concerns and that hurling debris, that's what we're going to be watching here, Juliet.
Yeah, 2 serious things. All right, Tom Hansen. Tom, thank you so much. Appreciate that. So let's now head to Panama City Beach, Florida. Mayor Stuart Tedemer joins us live now. Mayor, thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about the storm and what's going on in terms of preparations.
Well, Panama City Beach has many years of experience with storm preparations. We activated our emergency responders last weekend. We requested volunteers to deploy for mutual assistance to the east. We prepared public works crews for any clearing operations. We checked our stormwater pipes and flows for our outfalls. You may know stormwater drainage is important for any coastal Florida town. We secured any construction items and moved equipment.
All right, we're looking at some live pictures right now, Panama City, as we speak. Mayor, what can you tell us about the evacuation orders? Have people been listening to them? Are they heeding the warnings? Are they clearing out?
Well, we are west of the center, which means lower impact, so we don't have any shelters activated and we don't have an evacuation order. We are expecting to be in an assistance and support role for recovery. Here, we're expecting about 5 inches of rain. We're just getting the outer band now, a 1 to 3 foot storm surge, and gale force gusts between 35 and 60 miles per hour. But we have a number of crews who have staged in PCB. Because we are a destination, our hospitality industry can support this. Our hospitality partners are community-minded and are used to hosting both before the storm and provide shelter after the storm.
It sounds like good preparation. We'll see how it all unfolds. Mayor, appreciate your time. Hopefully everyone will be safe and we'll get those evacuation orders ready for others in the area, not necessarily your area. All right, Mayor, thank you so much. All right, as we track Hurricane Helene's landfall, CBS News has you covered on air and online. You can head to cbsnews.com/Helene for all of the most up-to-date information. All right, the president of the Palestinian Authority addressing the UN General Assembly in New York, calling on world leaders to stop the war. Up next, CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis is live in New York for us. You are watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Capitol Hill is in full swing today. The task force investigating the assassination attempts against former President Donald Trump holding its first public hearing today. A number of witnesses have already testified to the security plans leading up to the July 13th event in Butler, Pennsylvania. So here's some of what they had to say.
The Secret Service did not have a lot of the resources that was in Butler for 2020. And this event on July 13th, they seemed like they had a lot less resources. There was no CAT team. I don't think the CS team was coming at first. And,
that's right.
And early on, we had mentioned our CERT team, which is Special Emergency Response Team, utilizing them. But they felt that they were just needed in the motorcade.
So the task force went on to show never-before-seen footage of the gunman on top of the roof from the Pennsylvania State Police. The witnesses pushed back on heavy criticism from the task force, saying they did what they could with the information they had. So joining us now is CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns, joining us about more information. Also, we're learning about the suspected Iranian plots to assassinate Donald Trump, and also any more information you may have. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. Good to see you. Well, the Trump campaign says it was briefed by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence about ongoing threats from Iran, specific threats from Iran to assassinate him in an effort to destabilize and sow chaos in the United States. Now, Trump, the former president, has talked about this on Truth Social and in various social media posts, talking about this threat, but this idea that he was actually briefed, his campaign was actually briefed by the Director of National Intelligence, kind of elevates this. This comes, of course, in the wake of two unrelated assassination attempts, and one apparent one just a couple of weeks ago. And we also know that the campaign has had to change plans for an outdoor rally they were supposed to have this weekend in Wisconsin, moving venues because of security concerns, being able to have enough security at that event. Now, we're here in New York. The UN is here. Lots of resources have been diverted to this city to protect all of those involved here. So that puts some additional burdens on things this weekend. But just goes to show there are these ongoing threats. The campaign has had to adjust for unrelated threats as well.
Yeah, so Caitlin, we're also know that Ukrainian President Zelenskyy in Washington as we speak, meeting with both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. So what will they be doing? What will they be talking about? Will they be talking about former President Trump and security issues?
Well, notably, the former president is not meeting or speaking with, as far as we know, Zelenskyy. And this comes as the two have kind of intensified attacks on one another. The Trump campaign has been very critical of sending further aid to Ukraine. Just yesterday, Trump was very critical of Zelenskyy and also suggested that Ukraine should give up parts of its territory. This comes, of course, as Zelenskyy has been critical of Trump, too, saying that he doesn't quite understand. You know, he may think that he can end this war, but he doesn't understand essentially what he is talking about. And Trump took that kind of personally there. But it also speaks to the idea that the Republican Party right now is a little bit divided on its approach to Ukraine. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, his running mate, have been for a while now opposed to further efforts in Ukraine. That has been a popular pitch among the Republican Party base, but you still have some Republican leaders on Capitol Hill who disagree with that approach and agree with the idea of continuing to support Ukraine to protect democracy abroad. And so that's kind of a sticking point there in the Republican Party, but also this all has major implications, of course, for this election, and that's something that Zelenskyy has been particularly keeping his eye on. He was in Pennsylvania actually this week touring a manufacturing plant. He's meeting with, as you mentioned, Harris and Biden today. His goal is to continue to have U.S. support in this war.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, CBS News political correspondent, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And the president of the Palestinian Authority addressed the UN General Assembly in New York, calling on world leaders to stop the war. The president also spoke about the dire situation in Gaza.
It is a crime of a full-scale war, of genocide, that Israel is perpetrating. Israel, the occupying state. A crime that so far has killed more than 40,000 martyrs in Gaza alone, and thousands remain under the rubble. A crime that has injured more than 100,000 others to this day, and matters are getting worse. Hundreds of Palestinian families have been annihilated. Entire family names have been wiped out of the civil record. More than 100 families have been completely wiped out of the civil record. They no longer exist. Thousands have died because of the spread of disease and epidemics and the shortages in medicine and water. Moreover, more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza have left their homes multiple times in search of safety and fleeing the systemic operations that the Israeli occupying army is perpetrating. And as this war of aggression continues, dozens are being killed every day.
CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis is live in New York for us. So some very strong words coming there from Palestinian Authority President. So what else did he have to say?
Sure. Well, Mahmoud Abbas focused his remarks exclusively on the conflict in Gaza, decrying the more than 40,000 people who have been killed so far and devastation across the enclave, which he said was no longer fit for life. He said that he was explicitly critical of the United States for previously blocking UN resolutions that called for a comprehensive ceasefire. And he called on Israeli forces to withdraw from the enclave entirely. We know that that is unlikely because the ceasefire talks that have been ongoing, that has been a key sticking point. And we know that U.S. officials have been trying to negotiate a breakthrough in that, but have been failing to gain traction from Yahya Sinwar, the de facto military and political leader of Hamas, which notably Mahmoud Abbas did not explicitly mention in his remarks. We know that it was that assault by Hamas on Israel on October 7th that launched this conflict to begin with.
All right, Olivia, excuse me. Before we go, real quickly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to speak at the UN General Assembly tomorrow. So what can we glean from that?
That's right. He's always been a fiery orator. He's taken to the UN podium before to defend Israel's interests. He's going to likely do so tomorrow, defend its comportment, its military's objectives in these conflicts, both over the past year and in recent days, as the Israeli military has escalated its attacks on Lebanese Hezbollah in the north. The Prime Minister is, of course, under a microscope right now as we await whether he'll sign off on a proposal put forth by the U.S. and a coalition of countries for a 21-day ceasefire. Neither the Lebanese nor the Israeli government has accepted that proposal so far.
All right. Olivia, thank you so much. A very busy day for us Newswise. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. That's it for us at CBS News 24/7. We leave you now with live pictures from Panama City Beach. Hurricane Helene making its way. Evacuation orders in effect. We'll be back here tomorrow. Thanks for joining us.